Aloha, I'm Netra Halperin, and we're here at Netra's News. This evening we're going to be focusing on the reefs, on flooding, on the ecosystem, on the environment, on how the environment and the economy are interrelated. And I have two wonderful guests with me here in the studio and I'm very excited to introduce, first of all, we've got Robin Knox.
Hi, Netra.
Robin, Robin is an environmental scientist. So go ahead, Robin.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show, Netra. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm an environmental scientist, and I'm working with the Southwest Maui Watershed group right now to write a watershed plan for the protection of water quality on the South Maui shorelines and in the streams.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm working a bit with you, helping you with that, and it's an excellent project. So I'm very excited to see what the final product is. So, and we've also got here Darla White, who is a marine scientist, and Darla works with for the DLNR.
Right.
So if you want to tell us a little more about what you're up to.
Sure. Thanks for having me very much. I work for the DLNR Division of Aquatic Resources, and I'm a marine scientist. We do a lot of the coral reef monitoring, so coral health, fish populations, and of course that's all tied in with the watershed. So I'm really happy to be here with Robin because our two subjects are very interconnected.
And tonight is a call-in show. We do have a call-in line. So we're going to be showing a video that Robin and I shot together. And then after that, the lines will be open. So if you want to call in, the number is 873-3430. So let's watch the video and show people about our tour that Robin and I went on. We walked around Kihei and looked at various flooding, why things were flooding, what can be done, how it affects the whole shoreline, how it affects the economy.
Right. We only, on our tour, had time to look at one of our streams, and it was really a great opportunity to see these streams when they were actually flowing, because most of the time they're dry gulches and we don't think of them as streams, but they have functions as streams, and one of the functions is that they do transport sediment. And so one of the problems that we have, as you'll see in the video, is it transported quite a bit of sediment down to Kihei and into the ocean. So
and what we talk about in the video, which we will see any second now, is how things like sediment. Sediment could also be called topsoil.
True.
So shoreline change, sea level rise is one of the things we're worried about in our plan. Even though we haven't had a rainfall event recently, the sediment's still out in the ocean. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Once the stream carries the sediment to the ocean, the swells and wave action can resuspend the sediment. So some days this looks really brown. Other days it clears up and looks more blue, but this is definitely an impacted area of ocean and shoreline. And when there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of sediment transport and stream flow that comes out. And during the flooding in December and January of this year, we did see a lot of erosion along the shoreline, but much of it was actually caused by water coming down the mountain, as well as rising water tables and whatever's going on with the ocean at the same time. And we had a triple whammy of 2 floods followed by a tsunami, so this area is really getting pretty complicated. We're looking here today at the stream mouth of Kalani Stream. And this is where we can see a lot of the impacts of some of the flooding that's going on. This wetland is kind of trying to serve its natural function of being a place where water can settle and be filtered, but it's somewhat small. It's been reduced by development around it, condominiums and such. And so when the big water flows come, the wetland gets full, and the water came through the parking lots of this condo complex here, There was mud all down at Canolio Villages there. They were having to clean up big mud in the streets and their parking lots. This wetland and the stream bottom got so much sediment put on them that the wetland elevation's actually rising, and so is the bottom of the stream. And part of this is due to when they bulldoze and scrape the mud up, some of it goes into the wetland and gets piled along the sides. Here, the bridge, or the road here, the culverts were damaged. You can see the damage in the concrete. It was almost taken out. These big concrete blocks that are here right now, those barriers, they get tossed around like tinker toys when the river flows. It gets to be a raging river here. The sandbar would disappear when there's water flow, and lots of sediment gets carried out to the ocean because we have a limited wetland area for the flood mitigation and for the mitigation of the sedimentation problem. So one of the real issues we have in Kihei is that our loss of wetlands is limiting us on our ability to have natural systems mitigate flood and poor water quality.
So Robin, I've been here before, and I'm noticing that it looks really low. I mean, I remember before when I came to help put the rocks on, that the water was all the way up to the higher parts of the rocks, and that this whole big lump of sand wasn't there.
Well, that's another impact, Netra, of some of the natural functions of these dry gulches are that they really are streams, and one of their functions is to carry sediment. So the stream carries sediment down, and that can have a lot of soils and really fine-grained sediments in it. It also can have sand, rock, pebbles. There's also sand that's formed from the ocean and from the natural geochemical processes there. And all of the interaction happens here at the coastline, at the shoreline, between these forces of the ocean and the forces of the streams. One of the negative impacts from having so much stream flow, so much water, and having no place before it gets here for the sediments to settle out, that leads to sedimentation in our fish ponds. So the river has actually carried a lot of not only sand, but debris and really fine-grained soil sediments into the fish pond, which is slowly filling it in. The tide's going out right now. If it were all the way out, you'd be able to see that it's almost filled in here. So again, there are many impacts from the way these streams flow and the interaction of the streams with our built environment, and the sometimes in our development of the built environment, we have perhaps unwittingly damaged some of the ecosystem functions. And so one of the things we can do is have restoration projects. Because of sea level rise, the coastal planners have a thing called planned retreat, where you look at buildings and what hazards they're faced with, and if it looks like Mother Nature's going to win, we have to decide, do we want to invest in trying to maintain this building at this point, or do we want to maybe invest in restoring the ecosystem and protecting a lot larger area of properties. And I think that this Kihei coastline has a great potential for wetland restoration projects that could both improve water quality and mitigate some of the flooding problems. Let's do the chair. Yay! Wetland restoration, yes! Now we're at the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, and this is a facility that has really suffered a lot of the impacts of the flooding. It's somewhat ironic because this is the center of research and education about protection of our marine resources, and the sanctuary where the whales come and give birth and mate. And here we've actually had the staff has been out here and volunteers shoveling mud out of the parking lot. You can see there's sandbags that are permanently stationed by the door of this building because so often the parking lot floods and we have to try to keep the water out of the building, and it has flooded several times. This is where our water quality laboratory is, so one of the impacts is that we can't continue our monitoring of water quality that we do with our volunteer program here because during the floods our laboratory actually has been flooded. The water levels here came up high enough. I have photos from the flood. probably almost come up about this high. So it's no small amount of water, and it leaves a lot of sediment behind. So one of the things we do with watershed planning is try to figure out where the sediment's coming from and make a plan to keep it on the land and use it beneficially. Water too, even stormwater, can be reclaimed and reused beneficially. So these are the kind of ideas that our Watershed Advisory Group is discussing and trying to implement a plan to improve water quality and mitigate some of these impacts. This stream doesn't flow all the time, but water is here all the time. We end up with some stagnation here. And you see that there's a lot of algae growing in the water. It's somewhat turbid and green. There's nutrients, both natural and added nutrients from man's activities that end up in these waters and degrade them. You can see some of the impacts of flooding in that the actual road itself has been torn apart, the underlying structure here that lets the water go through. And this is where the county has said they're going to build a bridge-like structure, because this river-like force is impacting this area. It's beginning to influence this area to a great degree, because what our watershed group data has shown, some of our watershed advisory group members have provided privately held rainfall data that's been taken for almost 100 years on Haleakala, and we see that rainfall events are beginning to get further and further apart, but larger and more intense when they happen. So we have more intense drought, more intense rainfall. That leads to loss of vegetation due to drought, which leads to a lot of sediment loss, which comes down when it rains through these streams. You can see this wetland. It had quite a lot of super fine sediment deposited. I'm talking, feet, anywhere from 3 to 6 feet, depending on what part of the wetland you're standing in. Just lots of this soft sediment that is pretty loose, and it can blow in the wind. This is also a site where a lot of our community has put in effort to clean up and restore native plants and remove invasives. But this is about ground zero for some of our flooding problems. This drainage basin is one of the largest ones in our watershed, and I believe the 100-year flood flow here is over 24,000 cubic feet per second. And I've seen pictures of it where there was actually white water here, that the water was coming down so rapidly. So it looks like a nice, peaceful little wetland stream today, but it's a raging river at times.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, well, that's part of the video that we made. So watching it, Robin, was there something that you felt like you wanted to add just to that point, or something you just wanted to clarify?
Well, I'd like to tie it back to the idea of economic development.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the public discussion and testimony, say with county council, you would get the impression that there's environment versus economy.
Yeah.
And there really aren't opposing forces. Doing environmental protection, doing restoration, doing wastewater treatment, things like that is good for our economy. And
yeah.
we do have a lot of challenges in figuring out how can we mitigate the floods in ways that are better than the ways we've used in the past. We've learned that if you just do a lot of concrete channel, like Iao Valley, I mean, you destroy a lot of the beauty and the function. And so we need to, with restoration, often people want that pristine, what used to be. We can't go back to that. But what we can do is restore the functions, like flood mitigation is one of the functions of a wetland area.
Yeah.
And we've lost that because we've reduced the volume and the size of the wetlands. But if we're going to have quite a challenge in keeping a building there anyway, maybe we should, if it's underwater quite a bit of the time, maybe we should consider returning it to the wetlands and to Mother Nature.
So those are really good points. And so Darla, how this is the first time Darla saw this. I wanted her to come with fresh eyes so that she could her instant reaction. So what is your reaction from your profession and your more the marine side of looking at things?
Well, wetlands are priceless for removing a lot of not only the sediments, but what's in that sediment. Mm-hmm. You know, once upon a time before people, it was just dirt, but there's a lot more in there than dirt right now. And the brown water is highly polluted with all manner of toxins and pesticides and herbicides and waste products. Pathogens.
Or drugs that people throw away.
Yeah, probably on a minor scale, but a lot of toxins in the water. Yeah. Those toxins are not good for people, and they're not good for corals. And with all that sedimentation in the water, the corals themselves are not only not able to thrive and survive and reproduce and grow, but any pristine new coral larvae coming from maybe reefs in a better area are unable to settle and revive those reefs. So we're losing our reef resilience in these areas. And that is a problem. It's a problem for not only the coral habitat and the corals themselves, but for the little cities or the homes they provide for the fish and everything that we love so much. We like fish.
And they all live together, and it's like it's a
system.
It's a system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You can't have one or the other. They all work together. They all belong there. They all have roles. So the pollution is a problem. Corals need clean, clear, low nutrient water to thrive and survive, and that's how our fish populations thrive and survive.
Well, we have really two major sources of land-based pollution. One is human sewage, and whether it comes from a cesspool or an injection well, it can do harm in the environment, whether it's treated or not. If it's not adequately treated, then it can still cause a problem in the environment. So we really need to look at how we manage that part of our built environment. How are we going to treat our sewage? What's going to happen with the runoff? And it gets into things like, how do we landscape? Do we have to have a lot of what's called impervious surface, which is the hard surface like roofs and pavements? But there are better, more low impact ways to build that make surfaces where water can pass through and infiltrate and go back into the aquifer, and that reduces the volume of water that's in floodwaters. And even contaminated stormwater, if it infiltrates into the ground, much of the pollution can be mitigated in the soils and by the plants. So one of the buzzwords is integrated water resource management, that we shouldn't think of our wastewater, our stormwater, and our drinking water and the ocean water as being all separate, that we should recognize the connections and the hydrologic cycle and manage it all together. For instance, we had this crazy situation in our watershed where cattle and deer were dying for lack of water. And at the same time, we're injecting 3 million gallons a day of wastewater in the same watershed. And if that wastewater was treated with ultraviolet light, which we have the equipment to do, then that water could be used to water livestock or to make fire breaks on the ranch lands, because wildfire is a real issue in this watershed, or any dry leeward side watershed. The fire is an issue. True. So it's a matter of starting to think of these things not as problems, or a lot of people think of wastewater treatment as the black hole where their money goes, because it can be very expensive. But if we start to see the value of that water for other purposes, then we see it's really a good thing to do. And the challenges that we face with having to do better treatment or better management of stormwater can really force us to innovate. Necessity is the mother of invention, and that can be an economic driver. And businesses, a lot of small businesses, come out of the need to do environmental protection. There are tests that need to be run. There are tests that need to be developed, and equipment, and and doing restoration takes I think the same kind of workforce that has recently suffered economic losses. If you're going to construct wastewater treatment plants, if you're going to do restoration projects, you need heavy equipment, you need people that know how to work the land, like agricultural workers. And so some of the people that have lost jobs may have skills that can be turned to a new type of economic development.
Exactly.
And even our tourism authority is now seeing marketing Hawaii as ecotourism, and there's now an ecotourism certification. And so certainly now we're clearly selling the ecosystem as our product. Certainly we should take care of it.
Absolutely.
And any money we spend on it is an investment. It's an investment in our future and in our quality of life.
Absolutely.
So, and Darla, have you seen over time, like for instance, I used to come here, I grew up in California, and I used to come here when I was a child and we'd go snorkeling. And my family recently came here on vacation and they went snorkeling and they said they were disappointed. And, you know, so that's gonna affect people's vacation choices if when they come here to snorkel, because I mean hotels, yes, we have some beautiful resorts, but they've got beautiful resorts everywhere in the world. So when we're selling our spot, you know, yes, we've got great weather and we've got nice resorts, but it's what's unique. I mean, we've also got the Hawaiian culture, and that's another whole show. But as far as our ecosystem, that's something that people are basically paying money to see. And so have you been doing studies or have some kind of longitudinal research on the coral system?
As a matter of fact, we do. Actually, we are very, very fortunate here on Maui to have some long-term data going back as far as 1993, where we've been looking at coral reefs around Maui at several locations. And monitoring is where you look at the same location over time, the same features of the reef, and you're able to detect changes over time. So we've been going to these same spots, taking data and collecting photographs, and what we've discovered is in most of the sites that we've been surveying over this time frame, we're seeing significant declines. Each of these areas has a different basket, if you will, a different collection of reasons why these declines are happening. But, and I want to make that point, it's never one thing. There is no magic silver bullet. There are a lot of different things happening, both with land-based pollution, overfishing, nutrient pollution,
climate change.
Climate change.
Aquarium fish collecting?
That has its impacts as well, but on Maui, not nearly as much as the Big Island.
Oh, okay.
Big Island's 80% of that. But,
wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so we are fortunate to have these long-term data. We know that our reefs are declining, and we know in certain areas what the contributing factors are. And a lot of that is land-based pollution factors and overfishing. Combined, the two work synergistically in a very negative way.
In a negative synergy, yeah.
Right, and the idea that the silver bullet, that comes up a lot with the question of pollution, and sometimes I almost see a little boxing match kind of commercial in my head that's like, injection wells versus cesspools, you know, who's the worst? But the reality is that all of those things contribute to the pollutant load.
Yeah.
And what our watershed plan is about is estimating how many pounds of pollution per day are coming from different sources in the watershed. And then we know right now it's too much because we're seeing the impacts, and we start trying to reduce it. And how do we do that? We do practices in how we handle things, not only wastewater, which is an obvious one, but also how we handle materials on the land. It could be construction materials, it could be herbicides or pesticides. You know, and also what we do to the land. Do we destroy the systems like wetlands that help us clean the water, or do we leave some of that intact? So we have all these choices to make. So our stakeholder group comes together to talk about these things, and we're going to recommend to EPA and Department of Health certain practices. So we would really like the people who live, work, and play in the Southwest Maui watershed, which is anywhere from the north part of Kihei all the way out to McKenna Beach and Little Beach. So, you know, quite a few stakeholders, people who swim on those shorelines or dive out there or snorkel, surf. Not a great surf spot, but there is a lot of surfing at the Cove in Kihei. So we have all of these uses that need clean water, and we have activities going on the land that are contributing to the pollution of the water. And it's accounting, an accounting system. If you're a manager of a large budget for some kind of organization and you hear you have to cut your budget 20%, that's a big cut.
Yeah.
You could lop off your arm and just get rid of the whole 20% out of one of your departments, just take it off in its entirety, but you probably wouldn't do that because it wouldn't leave your organization very functional.
Right.
So it's the same way in the watershed. You know, we can say, oh, let's try to get all the pollution reduction out of this one source, or we could all reduce a little bit, and that might get us there.
Right.
And so this kind of planning really is an accounting system. It's accounting for watershed and where are the pollutants coming from, because once we understand that, we can understand how to reduce it. And we really need participation from the people who are ranchers, the resorts, the business and marine recreation businesses, those kinds of things, because the practices need to work. And if we don't get input from the kind of industry that's doing the practices, what we recommend might not be too practical.
Right.
And we really want it to work. So we're inviting people to come to our next meeting, which is August 11th at the Whale Sanctuary in Kihei, where we were filming about the floods. You know, that right there at that site we'll have a meeting, and it's 3 to 5, and so everyone's welcome to come to the Watershed Meeting, August 11th.
And as you can see on the screen, we are accepting questions, so 873-3430. Oh, the date. What is the date? August 11th, you said.
Yeah, for the Watershed Meeting, it's August 11th,
right.
3 to 5 p.m.
3 to 5 at the Whale Sanctuary.
At the Whale Sanctuary in South Kihei.
And the thing I want... And the other thing I wanted to mention is what you were saying is that, you know, the injection wells versus, you know, aquarium reef fishing, you know, that idea that it's not really one or the other, but it's a combination. And I was talking to Dr. Pang, who's the Maui Director of Public Health, and we were actually discussing pesticides, so a different topic, but he was saying it's not just this pesticide, okay, this one has been cleared, okay, this one has been cleared, is the combination. So when you start getting the combination of pesticides, and even the combination of pesticides in one human's body, you know, eat cauliflower one day and then broccoli the next and those things. And so I'm saying that that's probably the same with the toxins on the reef. You know, so you've got the, you know, the overfishing, you've got the aquarium fish collecting, the injection wells, you know, suntan lotion, all these different things. So it's probably more than just accumulation. It could be interacting synergistically in a negative way and exacerbating it exponentially.
We call it multiple stressors, and Darla's an expert on reef resilience and how it responds.
I have an excellent example. Okay, so in Lahaina, where the wastewater injection wells have been demonstrated to be coming out on the reef there at Airport Beach, locally it's known as Airport Beach, at Kahikili Beach Park in North Ka'anapali. The reef there, those injection wells have been in place for what, 40 years?
No, less than that.
30,
I think
30?
it was the 80s when they went in.
Well, regardless, they've been
A long time.
The water has been coming out where it was not anticipated to come out onto the reef for this long amount of time. And what a lot of folks don't realize is it's not just you flush a toilet and that's all that goes to the sewage system. It's everything that goes down a drain. It's all your personal care products. What did you scrub your carpets with, and all those cleansers and your pharmaceuticals. So there's all manner of different chemicals and things going in there as well. All of these things are going out onto the reef and impacting the corals.
The fresh water itself.
The fresh water itself, that
Yeah.
was a major point I wanted to make. The reef at Kahikili still has a lot of structure, but it's become very, very, very fragile. And we really believe that this is in large part due to the fresh water coming out on the reef. Fresh water is slightly more acidic, if you will, than ocean water. Ocean water's got a pH of about 8.2 and fresh water a little over 7. So this alone may be causing a localized acidification impact, and we're seeing the reef collapse in areas. So it's a big concern.
Yeah.
So you've got fresh water, you've got the nutrient pollution. We have algae that's literally crawling over the coral and killing it. We've got diseases there that are not healing. You know, usually, everybody, all organisms get sick, right? But if you get a cut, it usually heals, right? That lesion on the corals is not healing. So we're seeing a lot of these different impacts, and of course, the overfishing, we've been able to demonstrate that we don't have the herbivorous fish populations. Now, herbivorous fish are the fish that eat the algae, they eat the limu, and that's really what they do all day long. So their populations are really important to helping the corals compete against the algae overgrowth, which is fueled by all these extra nutrients coming into the system from our pollution. So there's a lot of things going on. And anyway, if you want to learn more about that, I have an invitation too. Our division has been working on this particular area from the fisheries management standpoint. It's the first strategy of its kind that's been put into place, where we have only protected the herbivorous fish in the area. So fishing is allowed, fishing is encouraged. I mean, it's a cultural mainstay. It's why. But we want to protect the fish that eat the limu so that they can help the reef thrive and survive, because it is the home for all the other fish. So this is the first time fisheries management has been put in place to increase resilience by using the herbivorous fish. And so we have a lot of research going on in that area to study the effectiveness of this management strategy. So this Saturday, the fisheries management area is going to turn 2 years old, and we're throwing a birthday bash. So from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Please come out to Kahikili Beach Park, and we have all manner of different things going on, from tours of the reef, scavenger hunts, fishing exhibitions. Luna Keikoa, he's our NOAA Coral Fellow. He is working with the community and doing fishing surveys, and they'll be doing throw net demonstrations and lessons. And Liz Foote from the Coral Reef Alliance will be there, as well as the NOAA Sanctuary. And
I'll be there.
Robin!
We'll be doing turbidity testing.
Water
and you
quality.
can come out and get a test kit and learn how to test the water yourself.
Could you please tell people what is turbidity?
Yes.
Turbidity is the measurement of how light reflects when it's passing through water. So if you have low turbidity, that's really clean water, and if you have high turbidity, it's kind of cloudy and you can't see through
very
it.
Good, yeah.
So we have standards, state laws that are standards for turbidity, and it's actually a pretty easy test to collect the samples for and run. And so Waino Cochran has the Kilauea surf shop over there near the Lahaina wastewater treatment plant at Hanakauai, near Airport Beach. And there's a meter there at all times, and you can get these test kits. You can test the water for turbidity, bring it in, Waino will read it, and we have a database that Liz Foote and Darla and I worked on, and some other folks. And so we have this whole monitoring setup where you can do fish surveys, you can do water quality surveys, you can do what's called a visual assessment, looking at what are the potential pollutant sources, what did it look like that day with those weather conditions, so that we really learn about our systems. And everyone knows government funds are really short right now.
I was going to ask that question.
And so these volunteers help stretch our scientists' dollars that are spent on, we pay the scientists, but they can only do so much. They're only a few people. And so we need volunteers to help us with the work so that we can make the most of the few scientists that we do have. And we love our volunteers. They're so amazing. And often
amazing group.
Some of the real significant findings first surface in an observation from a volunteer.
Yeah.
And then we investigate that further. So they're a really important part of what we do. And there's lots of just amazing free training available about coral disease or fisheries, you know, learning to identify the fish. And I've gotten a real education working with the volunteer programs.
Our citizen scientists around the island, they're so valuable, and we have a really engaged community. We are really fortunate here.
Maui especially.
And so all of these volunteer observations, these citizen science observations, we've, like she was saying, we pulled them together into an online database that is specific to citizen scientist observations, and they're geared toward managers' needs. Like Robin's turbidity tests, and it's been termed the Turbidity Task Force now by Tamara Paulton. But she has it designed so these data are usable by the Department of Health and the EPA. So they matter, and it's designed to actually be able to make a difference.
I just wanted to tell you another potential source. This is from a different field, but there's something called First to Work, and it's for people that are getting public assistance. And now, if you get public assistance, you have to work 35 hours a week. If you don't have a paying job for 35 hours a week, you can supplement it with volunteer work. Wow. And so then people, because people say, oh, those people in Whaleflower should do volunteer work and clean the beaches. Well, now they can. So that would be a way to get people that are on public assistance and would like to give back to the community in that way, that are interested in the environment. I work for a social service agency, and we have people in that agency, Neighborhood Place of Wailuku. But they can also work, if you're a nonprofit, 501c3, then I think you're eligible to get people to help you. And I think that would bring in people that you might not otherwise be getting. Because probably right now you're getting more the people who are retired or, you know, just kind of have some time in their hands. But this would be people who, you know, are more struggling in their lives, and people that are integrated within the community, have maybe lived there their whole life. And it would be a good way to bring a whole new crowd in.
I love that idea. I love that program. There's a lot of opportunity, and we're happy to give them training. Yes. So anybody who's on that program,
these ladies could use your help. Come on down.
Come on.
What I find is so amazing about the volunteer citizen scientists is how quickly they really pick up the lingo, and their observations really start to help us understand the system, and they start to understand the system. And then when it comes time for, you know, the county council to make decisions, people that have engaged in this way can be more informed in their testimony, and they can actually feel like they're doing something. That's what I hear from the volunteers. It's discouraging, as Darla and I can tell you, if we have to every day look at decline and things getting worse. And sometimes when people hear about it, they don't want to hear about it because it's too much. It's overwhelming, it's startling, it can be negative. But there is real hope because the systems are resilient. And working in water pollution control, I've seen a lot of areas where when we stop the pollution, we didn't even have to do a restoration. The system came back on its own. And, you know, so there's an opportunity for people to learn and then be effective in letting their decision makers know what they want, and then that can lead us to more effective management of our resources. Because these things are for all of us. Our lives and livelihood and our quality of life all depends on good water quality.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a point of something she said. When you remove the pollution, the ecosystem was resilient.
Wait, excuse me. I think we have a caller.
Okay. Great.
Hi, caller. What is your name?
Oh, my name is Mike.
Mike, welcome, Mike. What is your question?
They told me there would probably be feedback, and there sure is.
Hi, Mike.
Can you hear me okay? Or?
We hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay, good. All right, then I'll go on. Number one, Netra, thank you very much for having these two knowledgeable wahine on. Robin Knox is Louisiana's loss is Maui's gain. Since she's been here, I mean, she's consistently, day after day, evening after evening, she's educating the public. But there's a different audience, so thank you so much for having her on. And I'm not slighting Darla. Darla works for the state, but she too, among the people that are educating the public to this problem. And this very basic thing that you mentioned, this thing about the environment versus the money. Why can't government understand it? I guess that's a rhetorical question. What I wanted to mention is, ironically, when you were showing in the beginning all the flooding at the whale sanctuary, the county is proposing to do a flood mitigation program along South Kihei Road, and it will extend from McDonald's northbound, but only as far as Kalaniakoi, which is south of the sanctuary. And it's like, well, why would you not go up as far as Ka'ana'ulu, at least to the whale sanctuary? Well, that's the plan. That's what the plan is, and, you know, we don't want to change it. And my one question, you mentioned all these sources of pollution, and the wise answer is saying that, you know, it's all these different things. What do you think about just plain old street runoff? We all know that we have these, where anything that runs in the street ends up running into the ocean. Is that another problem, source of pollution for us?
Mike, it absolutely is. And thank you for the kind words that you said earlier. I'm certainly inspired by people like yourself who have actually made a difference, and like you did with the pump don't dump, actually made something happen. Streets, the runoff from streets carries a lot of toxic materials. That there are oils, any fluids in your car that might leak end up on the streets. The tires wear on the streets, and they're or organic chemicals and heavy metals in that. It's especially a big, what we call first flush, which is, you know, when the rain comes after a long dry period, there's been a lot of time for the pollutants to build up on the land. And so you get this effect called first flush, where that first rainfall will really move a lot of pollutants off the land into the water. And it's especially a huge effect, I would imagine, because I haven't seen any data on this yet, but if you think about it, we're on the dry leeward side of islands. Our dry periods are extremely long compared to most of the data that's been generated on this. So our first flush from those roads after it hasn't rained in half a year or more is probably a pretty heavy load of pollutants. Yeah. But those are the kinds of things that watershed planning and water quality management and planning can answer those questions, because over time we will monitor and we'll actually measure runoff, and if we measure the flow and we measure the pollutant concentration, we can know exactly how much pollution is there, and we can start to understand if it's getting better or worse, for one thing, with more monitoring. So yeah, the street issue is a problem, and in some places they actually clean the streets, because if you wash it off in smaller increments, then you don't hit the ecosystem so hard with the big first flush. Right. So that's an example of a best management practice that might have a role in solving this problem.
Or even if they could clean it and suck the water and, you know, take it to somewhere else instead of cleaning it and letting it flood. I don't know if they can.
Well, you know, we have to realize it's a big watershed, and there's lots of different areas too. It might be harder in some areas, like in the urban areas, to do that, but there actually is a plan underway and a study for upcountry to reclaim stormwater up there so that the farmers could have it for water supply.
Exactly.
And you know, the sediments, we talked about that earlier. There was a tremendous amount of sediment that came down those gulches. And a lot of it's still in those gulches.
Yeah.
Not all of it went to the ocean. And people are looking at it going, wow, that's great topsoil. What can we do with that? Because it's been contaminated, it would probably be better to compost it before you use it for something else, but certainly it's beneficial. There's a beneficial use out there for all of
Right,
that.
right.
So,
Yeah, and I think that you mentioned earlier that the data is indicating that the storms are getting less frequent but more severe.
Yeah.
And then when you're telling us about how the first flush is so severe, so that seems like that would be more intensified now as nature is changing and man is not cooperating, that's going to make that situation even worse. And I did hear someone asking the county, what's the proper way to dispose of used antifreeze, as we call it, or engine coolant? And presently there is no plan. So when you tell the public, well, there is no plan, what are they going to do with it? They're going to throw it in the street, and it's going to go right into the ocean. That stuff is horrendous.
right, and that's again where the county can play a role. Often what local governments will do is have something like a household hazardous waste day. And I didn't know that they didn't take the antifreeze, Mike. I know that Community Work Day does have an event coming up where they will be able to receive old paints and pesticides and things of that nature. So maybe it's possible that they could take the antifreeze at that time too.
I agree with you. That certainly seems like it would go hand in hand. Of course, Community Work Day does marvelous work,
Yeah.
but it seems like that may be a niche that needs to be filled. And I did hear one uninformed person say, well, we don't have that here because we don't freeze, so we don't have antifreeze. And they were corrected and said, well, no, it's just called coolant. It's the same
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, Community Work Day seems like the one that would be able to handle that. Now, unfortunately, I guess that's not a seasonal kind of thing. People have paint and hold it, but if someone has to drain your cooling system, they're probably not going to hold on to it. But it's just one of the many, many things. As you said, it's all these things, all these factors coming in. Anyhow, I'll get off. I've been babbling here for a long time, and let someone else call in. But thank you for an excellent, informative
Thank
show.
you, Mike, for calling.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks for all your work, Mike.
Aloha.
Aloha.
So let's hear. Let's watch a little bit more of the video of you talking. One of the things you were talking about in the video was some of the things we've gone into: the cows, wild fowl, the birds. So.
Well, I haven't seen it yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing it in the video.
Like I said, I like to keep my guests kind of coming in here fresh, not all rehearsed, and already having seen it. So I guess we. What does she say? Here we go.
So, Robin, what is this project? It looks like a group of people working together to fix some of these problems and to clean things up. What are they doing?
This is one of many very well-intended projects in our community that shows how much people are concerned. They're concerned about the beauty of the wetlands. When the floods come, they bring down lots of debris and trash. Anything that's been thrown in a gulch anywhere on the mountain ends up coming down and ends up in our wetlands. So there's been a lot of trash hauled out here. Members of our community like Dee Larson, Keikioka Aina have been for years pulling invasives and planting natives here. But this level of restoration can only get you so far, pulling out trash and making the plants right. We have to look at the hydrology and the sediment itself and figure out what's going on with that so that maybe we can keep some of the water from coming down quite so fast and maybe keep the sediment on the land instead of creating elevated wetlands and polluted oceans.
Hey guys, what's this Great American Cleanup? What is that?
Just pulling the trash.
So we're here in the wetland, and another impact of what's been going on with droughts and things like that is that there's not been enough water for some of the cattle, and some of the ranches last summer actually had to slaughter some of their cattle on an emergency basis because they didn't have enough water to keep them alive. And there's been a large amount of cattle remains in the floodwaters and in the sediments that are deposited in this wetland. We've been finding bones on the beach and all throughout this wetland. And this is where a hole was dug to do some sort of water percolation test, but it really shows you how deep down just the soft sediment is. There's several feet of it, you know, evident right here. Okay, so here we're looking up the watershed that's behind this wetland. The stream itself, generally water at the surface ends about where we are here. But when it rains, surface flow comes down from that watershed above and comes through this drainage path here and enters the wetland, and it spreads out when it gets to the wetland and drops its sediments, hopefully, before getting to the ocean. But in flood events, of course, the water's coming so fast and there's so much of it, this is not enough volume to contain it all and let it settle. So we're going to go further up the watershed, see if we can figure out where is all the sediment coming from.
So Robin, how does all this flooding affect the condominiums in the area?
There's been a lot of impacts to all businesses and the county due to the flooding. There's a high cost of cleanup. We have people who are coming here for tourism and recreation, and so we want to not have them around in all this mud and the dust that remains when the mud dries up. This is Canolio Villages. They are probably one of the most impacted condominiums. They are right in the floodplain. I saw them out cleaning up after every one of these floods. I know their employees spend a great deal of time doing that. This is another one that's impacted by the course of the river itself, because when the water came up, it became a river actually flowing through their parking lot. I didn't see that myself. I've been told that by the residents there. So I can see that the county and other businesses are really having some economic impacts, and this has the potential to economically impact not only our property values, but our way of life, our tourism industry, our ecosystems. So what I hope we can find is answers that don't just mitigate the flood problems, but also protect and recognize the values of our wetlands, our waterways, and our oceans.
Director. Okay, so Darla has a very exciting announcement about the United States
Coral Reef Task Force.
Coral Reef Task Force, and a designation they made of West Maui coral reefs as a priority.
So yes, so on the subject of watersheds, watersheds are very, very important to our coral reefs because everything's connected, Mauka to Makai. So the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force made an announcement at their February meeting that they have chosen West Maui as their priority watershed for the Pacific. What this means is we have a lot of attention nationally on us here on Maui, which is a great thing because here on Maui we are actually a little bit depauperate of researchers and some of the federal agency offices, and now folks are coming here to actually help our watershed, Mauka to Makai, to help our reefs.
That's very exciting.
Very exciting.
Congratulations. I'm sure you were a big part of calling attention to the importance of this issue.
The Kahikili Herbivore Fisheries Management Area is within that watershed, and within the first year of the Fisheries Management Area, the Hawaii Coral Program designated that area as a priority site, one of 2 priority sites within the state. And that brought a lot of focus here to help understand some of the complexities of the reef decline in that area. And of course the injection wells are a focal point there as well. And because of all the successes that we've had over these last couple of years, the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force designated this as a priority watershed. So we're very, very happy about that.
One of the high points for me was when the Coral Reef Task Force toured our wastewater treatment plant.
Oh.
That was amazing to see the coral people and the wastewater engineers getting together to talk about the problems. And then we took everyone out to the reef too, so that was really amazing.
And that's what I do on every show, which is try to bring up important, crucial, serious issues, but then also talk about how progress is being made within people that are professionally doing on a daily basis, and also how people within the community can chip in. Either, you know, I'm sure they take money and to donate, but also to come to work, to help, to testify, because all of these issues, you know, last time it was about finance and the banks, the environment, corals, watershed, all of these issues, we can do something about this. We are an empowered people. We can make a difference.
We can.
Absolutely, absolutely. And participating in the public process is a privilege, and our decision makers aren't going to know what you want unless you get up and say it. And you don't need to be a professional, and you don't need to be an expert. You just have to live and love Maui.
Exactly. I mean, if a surfer got up there or a child got up there and just said, you know, looked the council members or the legislators right in the eye and says, you know, I love the coral. My whole life is around the ocean. You know, that's what keeps me sane. That's what keeps me happy. You know, that kind of stuff matters. People, they need to hear it because they're here to represent us, and, you know, we can't take it for granted that they know what we need.
And I think because the community did show up and speak out for the West Maui situation to the EPA, that's why we're seeing some action on pollution control. And I'm very thankful to the leadership of both Charmaine Taveras and Alan Harikar. Both of our two immediate past mayors have been leaders in making some of this happen, so I appreciate that too.
Okay, and I wanted to talk about my sponsor, my first sponsor. That would be Threes Bar and Grill. They are a wonderful establishment, premier, serving wonderful food, fusion, Asian.
Delicious.
Delicious. They have a really good nightlife, lots of bands, lots of dancing, lots of great things. So they're in Kihei Kalama Villages, so absolutely check them out. And again, I want to thank my wonderful sponsors, Robin Knox, Darla White. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll have you on again once things are changed and morphed, and you can give us an update. Thank you so much. This is Netra Halperin with Netra's News. Thank you so much for joining us.